The Simon Marais Mathematics Competition really started back in 2015 or 2016. I thought that there was a gap in terms of competitions in the Asia-Pacific region. We were really looking to what existed elsewhere, and the Putnam seemed like a really good example of a competition that promoted creative problem solving, and there didn't seem to be a competition here of a similar nature. And at that point I started talking to people about starting a competition like that in Australia, and preferably for the Asia-Pacific region. And the Marais family really took a keen interest in the competition itself.
I first met Simon, I think, in our later high school years in South Africa. So there was a national science competition and I met him there. And then we actually went to the same university as well, so the University of Stellenbosch in South Africa. So we've sort of had essentially been intertwined careers and academic background for most of our adult lives. You know, we had this period when Simon and I were both in Sydney, and in fact we used to meet up for mathematical lunches. And somebody else who's made a contribution to the competition as well, Philip Hofflin, he and Simon used to get together for exactly the same reason.
So back in 2011, Simon Marais actually hired me into Allan Gray. I still remember a number of 4-unit maths questions that he would bring to work, and we would come up with different ways of trying to solve them, and it was always an entertaining sort of activity outside of work that would keep us occupied in the downtimes.
And so when Simon passed away, I heard this idea that Suhas had. I completely agreed. I thought it was a fantastic idea, precisely because of Simon's lifelong love of problem solving and mathematics, and because we'd literally done it together. There was a real need for it as well. There was absolutely nothing like it in the Asia Pacific or indeed in Europe, and so the stars were aligned, and we went with that.
So we approached many mathematical societies when we were getting the initial support for the competition. The Australian Mathematical Society was certainly an important one, and I was Vice President of AustMS at the time. We approached the various other Asian countries that we thought would be keen to participate. And it was clear in that process that there was a big appetite for a competition based in Asia and suitable for Asian time zones, because it was just so difficult for students to either travel there or attend things during what would be their nighttime hours. So we got a lot of support from societies like the Hong Kong Mathematical Society, the Singapore Mathematical Society. There was an enormous amount of goodwill.
That's been one of the hallmarks of the competition, was the degree of just goodwill and volunteering that you found all around. And the Australian mathematical community has been supportive of it right from the beginning. For example, Dr. Norm Doe, who was chair of the problem committee at some point, Professor Tony Goodman, who in Melbourne, who was the first chair of what we called the advisory committee at the time. They had a lot of experience, a lot of contacts that were very, very helpful. And the rest really, we literally were creating the rules and the procedures more or less out of thin air. There were also elements of the competition that we put together that are quite distinctive. So the first thing is the fact that you've got pairs participation. And that was very deliberate, because I think in all sciences, and eventually also in mathematics, which is sort of more on the cusp between science and humanities, the move has been towards more cooperative problem solving. At the end of the second paper, every year since the first competition, we've had an open problem, possibly with a part A that's a minor example that's been solved, but then with a part B that hasn't been solved. So that's a real feature. As far as I know, we're the only mathematics competition that does that. We're proud of that. I think the problem committee loves putting together those problems.
One of our key values in SMMC is equity. We've always understood that to mean that we should be trying to create a competition that enables students from a wide range of backgrounds to discover the talents that maybe they didn't even realise they possessed, We've been keen to try and increase the participation from female and gender diverse students who are underrepresented in the mathematical sciences, introducing prizes specifically to reward the performance of students from those backgrounds, designing the pairs competition. This was designed in consultation with the Women in Mathematics Special Interest Group of AustMS as a way of encouraging students to participate in the competition who may not have done competitions in high school and may have been intimidated by the idea of competing on their own. And in the future, we want to continue these sorts of initiatives and investigate other ways of bringing those underrepresented groups on board. We've been keen to reward performances by students from those countries with a less well-developed mathematics curriculum. So for instance, we've introduced special prizes for students who perform the best in their university, regardless of where that performance sits in the competition as a whole. And because of the competition's ties to Africa, we're particularly keen on expanding the number of African countries that take part. And we've got some great progress there already, with South Africa being now well established and involved, not just as student participants, but also in terms of supplying problems for the problem committee. If the competition can encourage the wider dissemination of those sorts of problem-solving skills, then that's going to be good for society as a whole.
The growth of the competition has been phenomenal. Around 30 universities originally competing in the East Division, and that has grown to the point where we have almost 100 universities across the East and West Divisions competing, almost 2,000 students competing across the two divisions. It's really nice to see students really take this challenge on. The support in Australia has been instrumental to the success of the competition.
Something to realise is the problem committee, in a way, is the engine of the competition. You can't have a math competition without good problems. So that has been really key for us, to have the interested and committed people there, to have them just do their own thing. We don't tell them what to do, almost not, except for the competition date, when to do it. And we've just been very grateful that they've come up with 10 years of good problems. And it's, quite a big operation, creating the papers, getting the papers out to everybody, collecting it all afterwards. The marking effort is enormous. So, we were excited just in the past couple of years to actually now have a professional CEO who's helping us, and that's made a big difference. And so I think that role will expand and become more important over the next decade or so.
Yeah, our competition couldn't take place without the support of all the participating universities, and especially the local coordinators who give up their time to make it run at their universities. And they do this out of the goodness of their hearts and their desire for their students to have as good an experience as possible when they're studying there. And because they realise, I think, that the skills that the competition brings out are ones that are genuinely useful for their students in their studies and their future careers.
The competition has quite a lot of momentum now, and we've got the experience behind us of the organic growth in the Eastern Division, and it's not unreasonable to think that similar things will happen in the West. That will keep growing and expanding. I think engagement with students, both in terms of number of students, but also the spread of universities. It's well known among a lot of the universities that have mathematics programs that, attract mathematically minded students.
In the next 5 to 10 years, I'd like to see the competition establish itself, not just among mathematics students, but also among employers. Because what you have to do when you're faced with one of these competition problems is scope out various different possible approaches, break it down into simple parts, and think about the constraints you're under and how you should optimize your effort. That when employers see a great SMMC result on an applicant's resume, they know that the competition has given that student the sorts of skills that will be useful in their career.
I think over the next 10 years, it would be great to see some of the open problems that have been posed over the last 10 years start to get solved. Now more than ever, with AI becoming such a hot topic, I do think competitions like this, which promote creative problem solving and create real creativity, become even more important. I think it's also nice to see that students who've participated in the competition and those that have done well graduate and go into the community and hopefully do some of that creative problem solving more broadly for their jobs or for academia in the future.
It's been really fascinating to see the progress of AI and large language models in tackling mathematics problems at competition level so far. that progress hasn't translated into being able to actually solve many open problems in mathematical research, unless they're of a kind where human researchers can guide the LLM to quite a significant extent. What would be really fascinating to see is over time whether they improve their performance on things like the open problem in our competition, or whether the skills to make progress on things like that is somehow essentially human. We should explore more in the future ways to design the competition that actually bring out the skills that are essentially human and prepare students for a future where they will be working with AI and where the important skills will be the things that AI can't do.
Looking at the future of the competition, 10 years from now or more than that, the main thing is that it continues. That's our main priority. We're incredibly lucky that we've got this very long-term support, because the Putnam was formed or supported from, I believe, might be the 20s or early 30s in the US. It was a time in the world where there was a lot of flux, many things were changing. And so to have that kind of visionary support that has lasted 100 years, I think we have that, and it's part of our job is to make sure that it actually happens and that the competition still continues. It would be great if we could expand the access to training for problem solving. In some cases, students might not have such good access. To do something like that more globally, I think that would be something to aspire to as well. And if I think back about some of the Australian prize ceremonies that we've had, of course it's great to get together, it's great to see the speeches and certificates being handed over and so on. The part that I enjoyed the most was quite often after the ceremony, when everybody's having the tea and cakes and the students get together and they're talking to each other and they go to the nearest whiteboard and they start solving problems, because that is precisely the point. That's what we were about. We enjoyed solving problems together. To have that spirit continue in whatever form fits the time would be fantastic.
One of the nice things about the competition is it encourages a lot of discussion between students. It's always nice to see students talk about the competition in various forums like Reddit, or universities advertise how well their students have done, or even have their own little prize-giving ceremonies. I think the sort of community that has been created around this competition is lovely to see.
One of the things that always impressed me about Simon was he was very able to relate very simple, straightforward, everyday problems to very deep mathematics. It came quite naturally to him, which is why we're so interested in problem solving. So he would have absolutely loved this. Straight to the point. Any of these interesting problems would have engaged him. He was not somebody for too much pomp and ceremony. It's the mathematics that counts, it's the problem solving that counts. And seeing that happen and unfold with the students, that's been very satisfying. But there's a real need for it. There are lots of students that are interested and will keep being interested in future. And I think he would just find it completely relatable. He would walk into that tea room and he would forget to have the tea and he'd start doing maths with the students.